Hi, everybody. Cody here. I'm so excited to finally start this official Divine Creators podcast. I'm so thrilled. I've been wanting to do this for so long. Those of you who know me personally probably know that I've mentioned wanting to do a podcast before, and I finally got around to it, and I'm really, really excited to get started here. I think I just wanted to have the opportunity to represent a voice in the conscious living or spiritual community and show people that spirituality doesn't have to look one way. Even using the word spiritual sometimes, I don't even want to call it that because aren't we all spiritual beings? Don't we all have a spirit? Aren't we all just navigating our lives and expressing ourselves in our own individual ways? And that looks different for everybody. So I don't want to restrict this to just people in the quote unquote spiritual community because at the end of the day, the same things matter fundamentally to all of us. And I just want to, keep that in mind as we move forward, and all of the things that we talk about on here will be relevant to somebody. However, some of the language, of course, that we develop in these quote unquote conscious living or holistic or organic communities for example, let's just say I was saying that I really wanted this podcast to be a spiritually woke podcast. Now, when did woke become a thing, by the way? Because it seems like woke has become this like really trendy word, in mainstream. But, at the end of the day, I feel like if mainstream is even talking about anything quote unquote woke or conscious or spiritual, I'm happy because so much of it is so blinded. It's really hard sometimes to consume a lot of that stuff. But I'm not going to say that I don't do it. I think that's a more controversial subject in these spiritual communities, especially the New Age community. Sometimes in the New Age community, we can look at things like mainstream media and villainize it, and for good reason. There's a lot of toxic things and subliminal programming, etc. in the mainstream media. However, there's also good in everything. There's a light in every pocket of life, and for those, the reality is most people are consuming the mainstream. So what do you do to those people? Do you just forget about them? Do you just write them off? It's like, no, you have to try to reach them in some way, and it's possible to do that. I don't think the goal is to just eliminate everybody else who are not woke. I think the idea is to invite them in and have a conversation so that we understand that we're all on the same page and can talk about the same things, So if this podcast serves you in any way, I'm so thankful, and I'm more than happy to discuss anything that anybody who's listening to this would like to talk about. I think I'm going to keep this in coordinates with the Divine Creators with Cody podcast. The Divine Creators with Cody Facebook group. I have a Facebook group on there where we have a community where we can just share authentically everything. But I think I'm going to do this podcast. I'm going to be posting this in there, and also be posting maybe questions for people if they would like to. If they would like me to discuss anything. Maybe in the future we can have guests on the podcast where we can have more conversation. That's the goal here, because I feel like with conversation, so much enlightenment can occur just through having a conversation with someone and exposing someone to that frequency of thought that you are in, So, we're going to see how this goes. This is a trial run. We've never done this before. This is my absolute first time ever doing this. So we're just going to get started and just start talking about stuff. So again, this is a casual podcast. We're not here to stir any debates. However, if conversation leads to it, I'm sure discussions are definitely, promoted. But let's just talk about our week first of all, because this is the new year, that we're officially in 2019, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. It seems like time is just speeding up faster and faster and faster, and it just reminds me to, take a second and get present with each day, each season. One of the things that I love about New York is you get the seasons. You get winter, you get a little more of winter than you want sometimes. Definitely last week. Last week it was below zero. It was -2 degrees. And today, or the other day, it was 60 degrees. So New York can be pretty crazy with weather sometimes, and it seems to get even worse as we get older, which, that's another conversation. And then there's summer and there's spring. You get all the seasons. But especially right now, it's the beginning of the new year, and this brings me to the first thing that I want to talk about here. So we're going to do something new, and you guys are going to let me know if you guys want to keep doing this. If you don't like this, we don't have to do this either. But I thought it would be fun to talk about, because a huge part of my life is shadow work. So a lot of people ask me what I do for a living. So, there's so many times that I just want to tell them I do shadow work for a living, because so much of what I do every day is just dissecting my subconscious mind and trying to rewire beliefs, and do deep healing work and regression therapies to help the healing journey that I'm on, and that so many of us in the quote-unquote spiritual community are on. So I thought it would be fun to do a shadow of the week, and we can also do a light of the week, because one of the things I learned from being so heavily involved in shadow work is you can get so drowned and sucked into it that you kind of forget the light, and you forget what it looks like to have that light in your life, and it can become so constricted and dark down there in the shadows that the light, sometimes you forget to prioritize that light. And the thing about shadow work we have to understand is the idea of doing shadow work is to illuminate the shadow. So by doing shadow work, we're bringing in light. So I don't want to say that by doing shadow work, I'm not prioritizing light. But the thing I'm saying is, when you do as much shadow work as I do, it sort of becomes this conditioning in your mind where you're unconsciously or subconsciously looking for all these shadows or negative things in your life that need attention, which is so important, right? But there needs to be a balance. So if you can create some more positive conditioning in your head where you're looking for those good things too, so much of what dictates our experience are these sort of subliminal programming that we unconsciously tell ourselves that reflect the traumas that we've gone through, so core beliefs that we formed through our traumas become this sort of negative playback in your head, really influences our thoughts and actions more than we realize it does. So, just starting off here, let's just talk about the shadow of the week first. Okay, let's start with the shadow. So, one of the things that's been difficult about returning to New York. So, I spent some time in different parts of the country and in the world over the past 2 years, and I haven't spent as much time with my family. However, being back in New York where I grew up, I've definitely spent a lot of time with them. And the thing is, on paper, my family did everything that they were supposed to do. So I had a house to live in, I had shelter, I had food, I was sent to school, I got my education, materially, I got a car, I was spoiled for sure. Materialistically, growing up, I was spoiled, I will admit that. Now, the thing about that is it leaves this opportunity to be abused in really covert ways. It took me a really long time to come to terms with the fact that although I have this troubled relationship with my family, we are both still committed to loving each other. So for a while, I kind of had to not turn my back on my family, but I had to go on this journey where it felt like leaving them, so that I could help understand who I am outside of that arena. All I've known of myself was who I was in that house. But what I quickly realized when I left that house was that I didn't know anything about who I actually was, and that scared me. So it sent me on this journey of learning who I was, and during this process, I realized all the things that were not okay, and I blamed them viciously for a long time. And that was really, really difficult. I don't want to say viciously because I know there are people who have a lot more troubled relationships with their families than I do, so I don't want to downplay theirs. I definitely still had conversation with them. We still talked often, but it was strained and it didn't feel right. And even at times now, it still doesn't feel right. But it took me a really long time to understand that although they didn't love me right, they still loved me. They just didn't know how to love me. So, being that I wasn't directly, abused, physically abused by my family, I was emotionally abused, mostly by their unawareness, by their ignorance is a harsh word, but that's what it was. Sometimes parents just don't know any better, and they only know what they learned. And I'll tell you firsthand, they definitely loved me and still do love me more than anything. I was the baby in the family. I still am, of course. And I was definitely spoiled, and they definitely did everything they thought that they could to make me happy. However, it was not enough. I am a gay person as well, so being LGBT and in this family too, in any family, growing up as a gay person in any family, you're going to be up against so much more. So many of my own demons that were already existed in me, just for, fundamentally believing that I was wrong or dirty, actually got projected onto them. So even when they weren't actively disapproving of me, I was projecting it onto them. Now, it's important to note that where do these beliefs in the first place come from? Where do I first learn that it's not okay to be who I am? Well, obviously that's at home. So at the end of the day, they are to blame. But what I've learned through my spiritual evolution, and it's not about learning it. It's just it gradually happens, It's you don't learn to stop blaming. It organically comes as a result of understanding that forgiving is not excusing. So if you were wronged in your life, when you don't forgive, you're harboring and holding on to that heavy resentment that's just stored and laying like a brick over your heart. That is so much to hold every day. So what people need to understand about forgiveness is that it's not about them. It's about you letting go of this pain so that you can be free and you can be happy. It's not about excusing anything. Forgiving is not excusing anything that they've done to you. However, I forgive them because they didn't know any better, and I know that they did love me. So this relationship that I have with them now is interesting because what I've come to is that almost every relationship is possible with the appropriate boundaries. And if you're both committed to loving each other, we're both committed to that, and we want to find a way to do that, but it can only exist with the right boundaries. So I've been having a hard time with that this week, especially seeing my parents so much more now that I'm in New York. And the more and more that I'm here, the more and more I realize that our relationship is best and most healthy when I have the boundary of not being around them for extended periods of time. So not living with them or just being around them for longer than, say, a week or two at a time. That's when it gets toxic for me, and that's when I'm ready to leave. But during those briefer periods of time, I know that our relationship feels good. I know that I enjoy being around them. I enjoy our conversation. I enjoy laughing with my mom. I enjoy laughing with my dad. I enjoy, watching TV shows with them, just like the old times. I enjoy going on, smaller, getaway vacations with them. That's something that I really enjoy, and I don't want to get rid of that. So for me, I definitely would like to keep a good relationship with them, but keeping a good relationship with them is only going to work with the appropriate boundaries. And I want to say, for those of you who do have troubling relationships with your family, it's going to look different for whoever you are. So everybody has a different relationship with their parents, and it's probably going to be different than mine. And if you do, it's just about assessing your situation and feeling what feels best with what appropriate boundaries, what needs to be in place in order to be able to have that with each other. But there needs to be an understanding that you both love each other first. Absolutely. And you need to know that. You need to have real-time evidence of that, okay? And you need to feel it deeply, you know? So that's the shadow of this week, you know. That was definitely the low note, and definitely something that is still on my heart today, for sure. But that brings us now to the light of the week. So the light of the week is the Lunar New Year. Can we talk about that for a second? So this is the Lunar New Year. It's not just a new moon. This is the Lunar New Year. Any new moon is really great for setting intentions. However, this one in particular was extremely active for me. Now, different new moons, of course, the astrologers here will know a lot more than I do. However, I just know that there are different new moons that will correspond to different people based on their astrological alignments, you know? So I can't say that I stay on remembering the dates for every new moon, but when I do remember there's a new moon, I do like to use that almost as an excuse to set new intentions. Whether that new moon corresponds to my astrological alignments or not, I always use that almost as an excuse to set new intentions, similarly to New Year's resolutions. So talking about New Year's resolutions for a second, it has never been one of my favorite ways to set goals or new intentions for yourself, because it's almost like you're setting yourself up for failure. How many people actually stay true to their New Year's resolutions? Not very many. So what I like to do is make it more of a practice throughout the year, and not just all weighted on this one day where you are more than likely to probably not keep up your New Year's resolution. Sometimes these new moons you can almost use as New Year's resolutions. This one happens to be the Lunar New Year, but any new moon in general, I personally love to do any sort of intention work. So I really took advantage of this new moon, because I actually had a lot of things that I needed to get done. And one of my things that I did not, again, set any New Year's resolutions, but one of the things that I really did want to prioritize more this year was productivity and general security. So financial stuff, as well as just location in general. I want all those things to be connected. You know, I want to be able to live and work and connect all in the same place. So I want to have people that I love. I also want to be somewhere where I can work and be financially secure and abundant, doing things that I love to do and that I'm excited about doing, and also be secure and safe and feel that sense of relaxation, and I just want it to be a place where I can escape and really unwind and decompress, and even have some nature around there. Nature is a must for me. That's the only thing about big cities. I think for most of us, you know, who are sensitive in nature or who run in the same circles as I do, nature is definitely a priority, especially when you live in such a busy world. Nature just completely strips you, you know, and it's just so calm and serene, and it cleanses my soul, it cleanses my mind. It's just a great physical activity. It's great for, you know, stimulating your mind and your body. So definitely I've been thinking a lot about that, but you know, the new moon definitely helped me catch up on a lot of things that I needed to get done, that I was really far behind on. And you know, one of the other things that I was actually surprised that particular day I went into, this is the light of the week, but this is actually part of the light of this week. So although that week was, although that particular day of the new moon was really great for me, you know, in a positive way, setting intentions and being more productive and just working more and feeling good about what I was doing and just setting a positive attitude. I went for a walk. I had to do a lot with the weather too here in New York. I told you guys that it was -2 the other day, and on the day of the new moon, it was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit we're talking about. So that is a huge difference. So just being in the sun in general, that vitamin D, it's going to positively influence your mood. So I definitely went out for a walk and got to do that, and that helped also shift my mindset, help shift my mood and be more productive. But the other element to this that doesn't seem to fit, except it does, was this theme of guilt. So I have a really core wound in my being. So we're talking about core wounds now. This is more of a shadow work conversation. So a part of this podcast moving forward, this is going to be an element of most podcasts, I would say, just because it's so integral in my life. And for this podcast to be as authentic as I would like it to be, we have to talk about the shadows too. But being that we already talked a lot about that, I won't go into the specific details of this. However, guilt is one of the most intense emotions to deal with. I want to say that the year 2018, for those of you who followed some of my work and seen some of my content on YouTube or on Facebook, I talked a lot about, before the year 2018, I talked about 2018 being the year of shame, the fall of shame. Well, for this new year, for 2019, I would definitely say for me, my theme was integrating this guilt. And this guilt was stored so deeply in my solar plexus. So right around where my ribs meet, right in your gut. There was so much weight stored in that part of my body for so long that it was so desensitized to, and the only time you remember those pains that are stored so deeply that have always been there are the times they get triggered. So again, we talked about my family. I had a disagreement with my parents about something, and it really brought this deep, helpless, powerless feeling over me. And as I went into it, I've went into this, dissecting these parts of me for so long, so many years. And I have to say, and I think it's really authentic to say as well, a lot of times we go into this thinking that everything is going to be perfect and switch immediately after, and that's amazing and wonderful. And not to say that that can happen, but it's most likely not going to happen. I don't know if it was the new moon. I don't know if it was the sunshine or what. It might have just been a combination of those things, the new moon frequency on top of my frequency shifting just from being out in the sun, shifting my mindset, being more productive. I think all of that sort of invited this new frequency in me. And the thing about law of attraction, right? Like attracts like. So two vibrations cannot exist in the same space at the same time in the same moment. I think the influx of such high vibrational energy really confronted those lower vibrations within my being. So it triggered this really deep core wound within me. And I went into it as I normally did, but something happened, you guys. Something crazy happened, right? As I took myself through that process. When I came out, I had the most, and I haven't told anybody this yet. I have not got a chance to tell anyone, but I experienced the most powerful, what is the word? It was like all of the air in my body and my lungs and my diaphragm of my being was just vomited out of me. I did not throw up, of course, but just all of the air in my being, the energy, all of me, I almost just let out this like enormous cough where I just purged all of this energy, and I've never experienced anything like it. I've never experienced that. And immediately after, I could literally feel the trauma in my being just completely dissipate. I felt it leave my body. And I've never felt that before. I felt things similarly. I felt things similar to that before. I definitely have experienced something like that before, but nothing that even afterwards I noticed this pain is gone, Sometimes you'll go through this process, this processing work on different wounds, and you'll feel great right after, but then, later in the day, you'll find that, okay, there's more elements to this. We have to dissect this. You guys, after this one integration, I don't know what happened to me, but there was a complete shift. And I just want to say, for those of you who, get discouraged doing this sort of processing work with yourself, that you think that it'll never change, I promise you it will change. The past 5 days since that's happened, 4 days or so, I've never felt this way before. I've never woken up and not felt that pain somewhere in me. I can't even find it. I can't locate it because it's not there anymore. It's filled with light. And the interesting thing about guilt is a lot of times it's stored in the solar plexus. What happened when I integrated that was part of that wound, part of that fractured, dissociated aspect of my inner child from that experience actually escaped into my heart. So I had this really deep pain, this wound in my heart, and I could feel it. It was throbbing. And over the next 2 days, I was able to go into that too and integrate that part of me. So I had a dialogue with that part of me that was still hurting, right? So when we're traumatized and we experience any distressing experience that leaves an impression on us and fractures us when we're younger, it leaves us in these dissociative parts, So the compilation of those parts equals Cody, right? But when we experience different traumatic experiences, and trauma's a spectrum, right? So it doesn't have to be anything like, it doesn't have to be acute trauma where something specific hurts you. Like if I work with some people who, have been abused, physically abused. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It can just be anything that registers as emotional trauma to you. And that can be something that seems not so painful, especially if you're very young. It doesn't take a lot to traumatize a child that doesn't know that much about the world yet, So essentially this processing that occurs is integrating these parts, is dissecting, is going into these different parts of my being, having a dialogue with them, and these parts are dissociated, so they're not familiarized with the other parts of my system yet. So what I do when I go into these parts is I open a dialogue with them, and I share the voice of the other parts who are maybe more developed and maybe more capable than that part who was dissociated at, say, 4 years old when he became traumatized. He's stuck in that 4-year-old body, and he's still experiencing that trauma in real time until you're able to go back, until you're able to re-experience that, or just hear that part out. Why is that part staying there? What is he afraid of saying? Why is he stuck there? Just have that conversation. And sometimes simply by having that conversation, you're inviting so much light that trauma just dissipates. And the process of doing this over years now, I believe that it was a culmination of all those things that led up to this one integration that helped me achieve completion. And it was one of the most amazing experiences that I've had in a really long time, especially on such an auspicious day, such as the Lunar New Year. Again, I wasn't even aware that it was the Lunar New Year at first, but I mean, what a Lunar New Year for me, man. That was really incredible. And, it might not seem like that big of a deal to so many other people, that specific day for me, talking about the things and the intentions I said, but it was a big deal for me, because those are things that I actively know are things that are going to help me find that freedom and security and peace, joy, happiness in life. And the thing about that, and the more integration and healing I achieve in my life, is I realize that happiness is definitely not a static state. It's not going to be great all the time, and I have to, I'm definitely somebody that falls into the trap of chasing something that's unrealistic, such as a perfectly static state of happiness. That's not going to happen, but you can make peace with the ebbs and flow of life and accept that as a part of what brings and fosters and cultivates that joy in your life, Because going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, it really is adversity and pain and mistakes in life that offer us perspective that helps us create the life that we want for ourselves. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to the first ever Divine Creators podcast. I can't believe this first episode's already done. I have so much that I still want to talk about, but we're just going to leave that for the next episodes. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. What I'm learning as I'm making this is it's extremely reflective. So in the event that nobody ever gets to listen to this podcast, I know that it's still serving me in some way. And I'm learning a lot actually in the process as well. So thank you guys so much for supporting and listening. I will see you next time. Bye.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.